Time to go on the docket now with our KMIR News legal analyst, John Patrick Dolan. Welcome, John.
Indeed.
And tonight we begin with the controversial Religious Freedom Act in Indiana, getting a lot of controversy. Now, those who believe in it say, well, it keeps government out of the picture, but those who are not so sure about this say it really is a license to discriminate. What do you think?
It's a little bit of a political football. Actually, there's a federal act, and several states have a similar act. It basically is designed to protect First Amendment religious right freedoms of business people. However, those who are adverse to the act think, well, this allows you to discriminate, as an example, against same-sex couples. However, the act requires that if there is religious discrimination, a hearing is available. There can be, if there is a compelling state interest in overriding the act, and frankly, it would be an equal protection question, and there wouldn't be any issue. There's no lawsuits presently pending in Indiana, so it's more of a political football than it is a legal question.
So those who believe in it say it takes a government out of religion. But is this really needed at all?
Well, there would be those who say it's really needed because they've had problems. Remember the Hobby Lobby case, etc. On the other hand, there are those who say this is a license for discrimination, and frankly, I don't think it's either. What it ends up being is a protection of First Amendment rights with a sort of a safety valve. If your First Amendment rights regarding your religion impinge on someone else's rights, as example for equal protection under the law, each has a right to have a hearing. So, frankly, as I said, I think this is more political than legal, although it certainly has legal accoutrement.
Yes, all right. Well, that's why you're here, and that's why
Indeed.
we're talking. Also, Joseph Edward Duncan. He's been imprisoned for murder and kidnapping, and he's lost his right to appeal. So now he's eligible for the death penalty, right?
So in federal court in Idaho, he was convicted and given the death penalty. He waived his right to appeal. He was also convicted in the state of Idaho and given the death penalty. He was also brought down here on a case where a young boy by the name of Anthony Martinez was kidnapped back in 1997.
Yeah.
And because he'd already had the death penalty imposed twice, we agreed in Riverside County to give him 2 back-to-back life without possibility sentences in return for a guilty plea, and that's what happened. Now, what happened recently is the Ninth Circuit said, you waived your right to appeal 2 years ago, or 2 years after you were sentenced. You let 2 years go by before you asked to have that reviewed and to reassert your right to appeal. Sorry, you waived, and so now you're eligible for the death penalty. 2 things still have to happen. They can go back to the Ninth Circuit on what they call an en banc, so all of the judges decide on whether or not he should have an appeal. Then they can go to the Supreme Court. But the only question, it's not what happened in the trial, the only question is, was he competent to waive his right to appeal when he did? And as of today, the Ninth Circuit has said it was a valid waiver, and therefore he is presently eligible for the federal death penalty. Haven't had an execution federal system in over 10 years.
All right, John, thank you very much for that. Our
Indeed.
news legal analyst here, our John Patrick Dolan. Always good to see you. We'll see you next week in